Greetings, friends. It's me, Wayman, and I'm doing a video right off the cuff. Um, just got back from Connecticut last night, and we were spending some time with some friends of ours who had a death in the family, and we just got back. So, while I was up there, I was invited to go to church. I went to church with some of our friends that we stayed with, and you know me, I just can't stop myself. If anybody invites me to church, I'm gonna go. So love it, because what I do there is pretty much I enjoy observing what's going on socially, emotionally, all kinds of stuff, and I end up thinking about it. What's going on? What are the people doing? What are they saying? What do they believe? I just find all that stuff very interesting. So, if some of my good friends watch this, this video isn't going to be at all a rant about you all, because you all are very good and dear people to me, and I care about you all deeply, and I think that a lot of stuff that happens that I see is, for the most part, widespread, and some of those issues or stuff is stuff that I personally probably still need to work out, especially concerning suffering. So what I find interesting now is that a lot of evangelical movements are trying to distance themselves from the common perception of church. Because when I ask my friends, what church do you attend? I knew what the majority of their family attended, but I didn't know what denomination they attended. And they say to me, and you probably heard this too in some point, and you might even be taught to say this. You know, they said, "Oh, we go to independent church, and our pastor's a church planner, and it's not like your traditional church." So that always piques my interest, because when anybody ever says that, you know, you're automatically wondering which is it, which you're, you know, it's naturally supposed to do is say, oh, you know, how are you different? So, you know, so I think that a lot of times they're trying to distance themselves, and I'm not sure why. So I think in general, a lot of the churches, and I see this as a benefit of religion, they end up being more or less social events, where the whole movement is very social. So being born again also means being inducted into this social group. But a lot of the times, those kinds of social and emotional things that happen there happen only inside the church, and when they leave, you know, things are pretty much back to normal. And I find it very interesting, because like the sermons say, you know, take it out into the world and try to pound that in, and it somehow doesn't get past the church door. So I went to this one church. I'm not going to give the name, because as I said before, I've seen it happen in many different places now. So we pulled up, and they have food donation from stores in the area, which is a great idea. And, you know, they get bread and all kinds of stuff. And they have it in this room. And the church people go in, and they're like taking bread and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. And they're like, yeah, you know, we got cookies here and all kinds of stuff. And I say, you know, what's this for? And they're saying, oh, the stores donate this to us, you know, to distribute to the community. In the back of my mind, I'm like, why are you guys taking it? You know, like, are you guys poor? Do you need more stuff in your refrigerator? So I kind of wonder about that, and I found that interesting, because, you know, here maybe the stores are giving the donations, think that they're distributing it to the stores, and then, you know, maybe they're putting it in their own cars. It's just great, because, you know, it follows what I say, you know, like, humans will always be humans, and maybe they just don't know they're doing this. It's, to me, it was almost like stealing from the poor. And then after the whole service thing, we're going out, and we stop and get coffee or whatever. And it so happened that at this particular place we stopped, the person I was with ends up getting us coffee. And I said, oh, I'll pay for my coffee. I asked for a medium, I got a large. No, don't worry about it, we got it. 3 coffees. And we leave with the coffees. Because she's the manager, I don't think we paid. So this is right after church, coming out. And I didn't think about it a whole lot until later. I was like, wow, amazing, But I think that the good aspect of it that I seen was how people bonded together. They were able to share their problems. And what I find interesting is along the lines of suffering, people bonded together in order to figure out ways on a social and emotional level to protect themselves and ask God to protect themselves against God himself. And in Christianity especially, the evil has been displaced from originating from God to the devil. So now it's, rather than the self being the enemy, or the evil coming from and good coming from God, it's been displaced to the adversary or the devil. So that's all you hear is the world does this, we do this. But really, the only change that happens, for the most part, is when you're in the group and part of that group, and they have a hard time getting it out into the world and actually practicing it. I have no idea why it's like that. So it seems that people maybe just don't realize what they're doing. But my question is, why would you have such high standards? And also, the whole idea of the service was definitely planned and geared towards having those types of experiences. Definitely. And they picked one song, it's called I'm a Friend of God. It's all over YouTube. You can see the video. Matter of fact, I'll attach this video to it. Even in the video, you can see a lot of social things and emotional things going on, which is really interesting. And I was thinking, as they were singing this and clapping and having a great time, and becoming all emotional and things, it's interesting that, their God, who they believe, according to some, is actually plaguing them, with all kinds of miseries. And they're saying that really he's his friend. How many times can you kick a dog before he growls at you? And I think that they try to make sense of that. They try to make sense of evil and create all these theological ideas and assurances that deflect the mind away from that, displaces the evil, and turns it into something that, oh, the divine is really on my side. So, submission to the Lord, the user, submission to the Lord. Probably love that kind of thing, because he's always preaching about how God hates us. But I hate that kind of sermon. I dislike it. I find it interesting, but I dislike it because it's far too pessimistic. And people's view of the future becomes very pessimistic, and they end up not having the capacity, after hearing it for so long, that they can change the future for the better. So, because I was unsaved, quote unquote unsaved, or I haven't accepted eternal life, or Jesus as my Savior, or born again, whatever the terminology would have been, I was kind of on the outside. I didn't mind it, not being included in the community. The way I seen it was, I was different from them rather than them being different from me. And I don't think that that would help me out at all. Because as far as the in-group social and emotional interaction and support that's there, it's very beneficial. My friends benefited greatly from having the support of religion. And however, socially and emotionally, people were there for them. And the community definitely supported them. However, the way they frame it with theology and a whole bunch of different things makes it hard for me to say, oh yeah, the divine is awesome. And I kind of take Job's approach and say, can't you ever leave me alone? Even when I swallow. Probably Job had a sore throat. He's like, oh man, my throat's hurting now. Sitting in the ash pile and breaking out boils. And now I'm coming down with meningitis, huh? So, I don't know. I just find the whole thing very interesting. Religion definitely carried him through. However, I think that the way it's twisted and the way the theology is built, it's built asking God to protect us from God, And I just find that fascinating. So you end up creating a social group of compliant victims. And it's all put in this animated, highly charged, emotional, and social structure that's played out over and over. The pastor is in the role of the pastor, and he plays that role through the whole thing, shakes your hand, smiles at you like a pastor should, stays in character, the whole shebang. Amazing. And I got a chance to talk to one of the drummers. He's just a kid. I went around, talked to some people, shook some hands, and he's been playing for 3 years. He taught himself, and it was pretty neat on a social level. I didn't have any problems with it on a social level. It's just the whole idea of it that I think is a little bit construed, like their whole idea about where and how suffering comes, how do we praise a divine being, and all those things. And I can safely say that God is not a friend of mine, because he's plagued me and my loved ones all their lives, and was the source of every undoing and death, if that sort of thing happens, and if he exists for real. And on the other hand, he's been the good of things too, equally. So I don't know. It was really fascinating, and I expect to go back there at some point again and observe to see what's going on. But I think that the whole born again thing is a little bit overblown sometimes, and what they profess at church and Sunday morning isn't actually able to be lived, through the week, because different sets of circumstances. And they say, well, we're only human, but how many times can you say that? They talk up and they preach the transforming grace of God, and how it transforms your life, and how God sanctifies your life, and take off the old robe and put on the new. That's a transformation. And what was fascinating is it ended up being about more of what you believed than what you did. And when they're consoling my buddy, he said, I'm sorry to hear about that to your father. Well, was he saved? And he says, yeah, he was born again. And he says, that's good, because that's all that matters. And I'm thinking, you missed it, because people need to be doing rather than just believing. So they believe they're born again, but they're stealing food out of the mouths of the poor, loading up their trunks with cookies that were donated to the poor. They're stealing drinks from coffee shops. I don't know how justice can come out with that. So if that ends up being me, and if that's what believing being born again. And if such a thing would make me forget my neighbor, clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit the sick and the imprisoned, and all the things that I'm required to do maybe as a Christian that Jesus in the letters of red in one of those Bibles tells you, then you totally missed the mark. I'm sorry. If it was me, I would totally take the whole readings of the epistles and Paul and just strip it right out. Probably the only text you need towards virtue and justice and mercy and goodness is probably Matthew 25, because it gives you a whole bunch of jobs to do. And people don't seem to be doing them. They do them within their own little group for them. But as far as taking it to the rest of the world, they're failing miserably, because I don't think that that belief necessarily transforms all that and speaks to people. Doing speaks to more people than telling them what you believe, because you're showing them and you're living what you believe. And even me, as a person who is a non-believer, was able to see those inconsistencies a little bit. And even though, and acknowledging that they're human, and maybe they lack some understanding in some areas, why have I personally been enlightened to that, and the divine being that lives within them, the transforming thing, doesn't alert them to it? Makes me a little bit suspicious. So, hang in there, friends. God is not my friend, but my adversary, and he plagues me day and night. So be well, and remember, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.